gentlemen, now we welcome you for the third technical session on MSME and startups. Indian MSME and startups has shaped the country's growth trajectory. India is now world's fourth largest economy and which is rapidly growing to become the third largest by 2030, with MSME and startups serving as the key drivers for this growth. Today, they account for nearly 30% of GDP and contribute 45% of exports and provide nearly livelihoods to nearly 240 million people. The evolving US tariff regime has introduced significant shift in global trade dynamics with direct implications on India's export landscape and MSME and startups. We have to consider this. This will be one of the points that will be deliberated today in the session. And as far as the Institute is concerned, Institute has constituted MSME and Startup Board under the chairmanship of CS Rajiv Bajaj, and various initiatives have been undertaken through this board. Institute has launched MSME and Startup Helpline with the intent of creating a platform for resolving the issues and challenges being faced by these entities. The MSME Corner is also published in Charter Secretary Journal of the Institute. MSME and Startup Catalyst is an initiative of the Institute aiming to guide and handhold MSMEs and startups in undertaking the necessary compliances and making good and effective use of the incentives and schemes rolled out by the Government of India for their benefit. I would like to now invite our learned panelist, Shri Alok Bansal, co-founder and executive chairman, PB Fintech Limited Policy Bazaar, CS SP Kamath, immediate past president, the Kochi Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Ms. Vinita Hariharan, public policy exponent and former chief of external missions, Ministry of MSME, Lieutenant Commander Sajid Kumar, EV, retired. Now he is project director with Kerala Startup Mission. And our moderators, CS NPS Chawla and CS Praveen Soni, council members ICSI, to please join the dais for our technical session. A huge round of applause, gentlemen. I would now request CS Dhananjay Shukla, President ICSI, to please come on the dais and welcome Shri Alok Bansal, co-founder and executive chairman, vice chairman, PB Fintech Policy Bazaar, by presenting him with a planter. Shri Bansal is a co-founder and executive chairman of PB Fintech, which operates India's leading insurtech platform policybazaar.com and the top lending marketplace policybazaar.com. He plays a pivotal role in steering the group's long-term growth strategy and managing investor relations. His core competency includes strategic thinking, process control, and execution. Thank you, sir. I now request CS Rajiv Bajaj, former council member ICSI, to please come on the dais and welcome CS SP Kamath, immediate past president, the Kochi Chamber of Commerce and Industry, by presenting him a planter. Shri Kamath serves as Executive Director of Amalgam Foods, a company established in 1977, specializing in food processing and seafood exports. He is also a prominent figure in the business community, having recently held the position of President of Kochi Chamber of Commerce and Industry for the year 2024 and 25. Now I would request CS Nisar Ahmed, former president of ICSI, to please come on the dais and welcome Ms. Vinita Hariharan, public policy exponent and former chief of External Missions Ministry of MSME, by presenting her a planter. She is alumnus of prestigious School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. She has served as Chief of Programs at Ministry of MSME, overseeing external aided missions. Later, she had joined Hindustan Coca-Cola Beverages, managing public affairs and communication across states. Welcome all the panelists. I would also now request CS NPS Chawla and Praveen Soniji to jointly please welcome our next guest, Lieutenant Commander Sajid Kumar, EV, retired. Now he's a project director with Kerala Startup Mission, by presenting him with a planter. He is a seasoned executive with over 22 years of diverse leadership experience, spanning government advisory, infrastructure development, strategic operations, and stakeholder engagement. We welcome you, sir. Now I will request CS Praveen Soni, our moderator for the session, to please take forward the session.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, esteemed participants present and all the dignitaries present on the dais of the dais. First of all, sincere thanks to the President ICSA for giving this opportunity. Friends, it's a very wonderful day when today we are holding this second day session. It's a foundation day, not only for the Kerala, but other states also. And I came to know 8 states are celebrating the Foundation Day today. Andhra Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Haryana, Karnataka, Kerala, MP, Punjab, and Tamil Nadu. So happy Foundation Day to all the states and the residents of these states. Today also the birthday of Lord Khatu Shyam Baba, one of the avatar of Krishna Bhagwan. So it's a very pious day today we are holding this workshop. I extend my warm welcome to all of you as we commence the third session today on this 53rd National Convention of the Company Secretaries on the theme MSME and Startups, Role of Financial Ecosystem and Technology. Friends, it's my proud privilege to welcome the esteemed speakers for this session. They have all been introduced recently. Ms. Vinita Hariharan, Public Policy Exponent and the former Chief of External Mission Ministry of MSME. Shri Alok Bansal, Co-founder and Executive Vice Chairman, PB Fintech, that is Policy Bazaar. Shri C.P. Kamath, Immediate Past President, the Cochin Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Shri Sajid Kumar, EV, Retired Project Director, Kerala Startup Mission. Friends, India is the world's 4th largest economy and has emerged as the world's fastest growing major economy and is on the track to become the world's 3rd largest economy with a project GDP of 7.3 billion by 2030. MSME and startup are the twin pillars of the India's growth story, and with over 6.3 crores MSMEs contributing to the 30% of the India's GDP and about 45% to our exports, they are not just the engines of growth, but also the innovations and of inclusive development. I'm happy to share that ICSI has taken several initiatives to support MSME and startups. The Institute has constituted MSME and Startup Board, MSME and Startup Helpline for resolving the issues and challenges being faced by the entities. The MSME Corner is also published into the Chartered Secretary General of the ICSI. The Indian startup ecosystems, on the other hand, is now the 3rd largest in the world, and with more than 1.5 lakh DPIIT recognized startups. The vibrant ecosystems driven by around 125 unicorns continues to redefine the innovations and entrepreneurship on the global stage. Despite notable progress, both the sectors continues to struggle with the fundamental challenge of access to the capital. The substantial credit gap for MSMEs and the struggle for the early stage startups to raise capital highlight the need for the resilient and strong financial ecosystem. Over the several years, the schemes has been launched and addressed their requirements, but for MSME schemes such as the Credit Guarantee Scheme, the Credit Guarantee Fund for Trust for Micro and Small Enterprises, the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, and the collateral-free loans, empowering entrepreneurs to pursue their goal without the burden of the traditional security requirements. For startups, the Startup India initiative was launched in 2016, providing tax exemptions and simplified compliances. Capital infusion is facilitated through the Funds of Funds scheme, and for startups, the Startup India Seed scheme. The recently launched Credit Guarantee Scheme for the startup further ensure that the innovative ventures can access loans without collateral. The financial ecosystems, technological innovations play a pivotal role in narrowing the credit gap faced by the MSME and startups. India today stands at the forefront of the global fintech revolution with its digital payment and landscape achieving remarkable milestone. A robust financial ecosystem encompasses banks, NBFCs, fintechs, alongside progressive development and government initiatives for the foundation of the MSME and startups to thrive. Friends, this session envisages the deliberations on the importance and startups on MSMEs in the economy, challenges faced by them, and government initiatives for their growth, and the role of the financial ecosystems, technology, and professionals. We do have a good and quality of the speakers and the panelists here, along with my co-moderator, NPS Bhai, and we will definitely run through this session, and we'll have a wonderful panel discussions among the panelists. So with this, we'll start up with the session. Over to you, NPS Bhai.
Thank you. Thank you, Praveenji, for giving this initial introduction. Thank you, President and Council, for giving us this responsibility of moderating this panel discussion on a very, very relevant topic. And we are fortunate to have experts. In fact, when I see the profile of our panelists today, we have one co-founder from a startup, and the startup itself, in fact, till the time I read about the full name, it was mentioned PB Fintech, so I was wondering what is PB. Then later I realized Policy Bazaar, which doesn't need introduction, and then we have two from Mr. Sajid from the startup mission here. And then obviously we need somebody from the ministry, and we are fortunate to have Nita ma'am. So what we have done is that we have, as of now, framed few questions, and then we leave some time for participants also to make it interactive. And the request I have already made to all the panelists is that we'll make this session as interactive as we can make it. And there is no fixed regime which we have to follow. You can certainly add your inputs to the question which we asked to one panelist. We'll start with our member, Mr. Kamath. And, in fact, as Praveenji has already mentioned, now our country has more than 6.3 crores MSMEs. And, we are employing, and those MSMEs are employing 11 crore people, contributing to 30% of the GDP with 45% support to the exports through MSMEs. Now, Mr. Kamath, my first question to you, to lay the context as well, how do you see the current landscape for MSMEs and startups? Because I feel people sitting here who are listening to us can really contribute to MSME and startup regime, because all these entrepreneurs, they don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the finances, they don't have the leverage, they don't have the backup to approach big organizations, the big fours, or the consultancy firms, global consultancy firms. So we are their first point of contact. Company secretaries are their first point of contact. And why I'm saying so? Because if they have to corporatize themselves, their first thing will be to initiate to form an entity, whatever form of entity it may be. If it's a company, obviously we'll incorporate, I'm presuming. And that's how we are known as corporate governance leaders. And when we incorporate a company, then obviously they'll ask us as the first point of contact as to how to get funds. Because ultimately what we have seen is that many startups, as in the last session also we were talking about startups do form, but many of them are not able to nurture, many of them are not able to grow to the level which is expected. So my request to Mr. Kamath is to share as to what is the current landscape for MSME and startups in India, especially from the perspective of the growth, innovation, and the emerging challenges, although we'll speak about challenges later. Over to you, Mr. Kamath. Yeah, please, you can use. Maybe for the first question, if somebody wants to use the podium, rest, then we'll have it interactive. Thank you, Mr. Kamath.
Thank you, Chawla Saab. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Kochi, because I am from Kochi, so it's my pleasure to welcome you to Kochi. And though I'm a company secretary, I've been invited here as the chamber, immediate past to the chamber. So my perspective on this matter is slightly different. Please bear with me. I have a different, maybe a different version from what is there in your mind. But friends, like this, our moderator said, MSMEs are backbone. We know they contribute 45% of the exports. They employ 110 million people. But sometimes I feel, I read an article which said, funding MSME, is it a fiction, they said actually. Very interesting. Is it a fiction? Because we speak so much on MSMEs. Being a president of the chamber, I have experienced in my tenure, people come to chamber when you have a problem. When things go fine, no problem. Nobody comes to the chamber. When you have a problem, they come to the chamber and say, what is chamber doing? Why don't you represent this? Why can't you represent this? So I have seen the other side of the MSME and the startups. The biggest problem today, friends, we know that MSME is the backbone. Today, there is a disparity between the intention of the government and the implementation. You ask people, they say government has announced the schemes, they'll apply. But then they'll say, no, the rules have not come. It will take some time, so wait for some more time. They make an application. And when they go after, they'll say, no, government has come with a new scheme, you apply under the new scheme. So this is what I got some kind of feedback from some of the applicants who had made an application. So there is an inherent problem. Let us honestly admit that there is an inherent problem in financing MSMEs. We know very well they are the backbone, but there exists the problem. And what government says? You MSMEs can go borrow money from the bank. You try how many people have gone and borrowed money without security, let me know. It is bank, they go to banks, then banks will say, no, you are not fulfilling this criteria. You apply under ordinary category, bring a guarantor, bring your net worth certificate, bring 3-year balance sheet, and apply under a normal borrower. This has happened actually. Then similarly, the kind of paperwork and compliances today. There is nothing less any exemption or any great exemption. MSMEs. Paperwork is same for actually. Though we talk of digitization, the documentation in the banks and institutions still continues to be same. They will not fund you without a guarantor. They will not fund you without a collateral actually. And where is the collateral and with the MSMEs? I'm little harsh, but that is the real fact of life. The MSME or the entrepreneur goes to bank once or twice. When the bank says, you give me this document, that document, he then goes to a money lender or somebody and borrows at a high rate of interest. So this is the actual reality, because this I really experienced as a chamber president actually. Other thing I'm telling you, what about the financial literacy? What is the financial literacy in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities? How many women entrepreneurs have been created by MSME department or MSME loans? You tell me, how many women have become the entrepreneurs? So there is a lot need to be done, but I think it's good that we're discussing this today, because these are the things we need to develop. Let us develop women entrepreneurs in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, because there's no financial literacy. We'll have to teach them, and that is the actual situation of MSMEs. I'm talking one side of it actually, so that we'll have something to argue and discuss. As far as the startups are concerned today, it's a great thing actually. India is one of the pioneers in the startups. But what is the situation? Yesterday I read an article, 11,323 startups have been closed last year. Previous was 8,300, 33% more startups have been closed. Don't think I'm pessimist, but I'm telling the hard facts of life. So 11,000 MSMEs startups have been closed. Why? The problem is you are not getting adequate fund. You don't have adequate talent. You need to retain the talent. All these startups depends on one person, somebody who's a technocrat. And our laws and our rules are so, you can't allow entrepreneur to think of burdening with the compliances. He has to concentrate on the business. We are killing his creativity by making him liable for all the consequence and the law. So these all things need to be addressed and given an ecosystem. And all the seminars we say, implement artificial intelligence, implement machine learning, implement this, that. Do you have resources? Do you think MSMEs have resources for this? All this requires some kind of special funding. You need to have tailor-made products. How many tailor-made products are there for MSMEs? Please let me know. It's the same scheme for all. No industry specific. Of course, in the last budget, finance minister announced for toys and for leather, some specific schemes. Good. Like that, we must have actually the specific schemes for MSMEs. Why I'm saying this is, we have been talking of MSME in the last post-independence. But even then, in spite of all this, okay, I'm not saying there's no improvement. Definitely there is an improvement. Definitely the things have changed. But lot need to be done. This all can be done when we deliberate and find a solution. As professionals, we are here to find a solution for the problems. We talk of risk management. When there was news of Trump going to impose duty, I was associated with the food processing industry. Entire industry said not more than 20%, maximum 25% duty, nothing to worry. Next day 50% duty. Where is the risk assessment? So that is where those are the challenges which are going to face in this uncertain world. But definitely I will tell you, MSMEs and the startups are going to be a future. We need to nurture them. We need to give them a platform, give them an equal level playing field. And then you will see our story, Vikasit Bharat, will certainly going to be, we can achieve that. And we must dream big, and definitely it is possible. This is my initial remark. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for laying the context, although I was thinking that I'll be bit more critical later, but thank you that you started from starting about the challenges and the way forward. So since we have a representative from Ministry of MSME, I'll ask next question to Ms. Vinita Hariharan. Ma'am, recently Deloitte has come out with a report. I'm sure we all have seen that. Very recent, October 2025, where they've talked about many aspects. It's a report worth reading. Everybody dealing with this aspect must, in fact, I'll request our own Mr. Rajiv Bajaj to also take up this report in the committee, in the startup committee which we have already formed, ICSI, and then dissect and see as to what solutions we can propose to the challenges which Deloitte has specifically talked about. Couple of issues which Mr. Kamath also highlighted are also mentioned in the report. One, that the biggest difficulty is the productivity ratio. Now, MSMEs are there. The difficulty is that we are only achieving around 18 to 20% productivity vis-a-vis the large enterprises. Now, if you compare this productivity ratio with other OECD countries, there it's minimum 45 to 70% percentage as far as the productivity is concerned. Now, the difficulty is that despite policies, our MSMEs are, because of non-availability of any collateral history to seek financial funding, and despite government initiating so many initiatives for financing, maybe Make in India, Startup India, then these policies, Pradhan Mantri Yojana, and so many other policies which in fact, the lack of awareness. In fact, company secretaries can be again, first point of contact for creating awareness. So, Mr. Bajaj, another task for you, I think, is to make our own members aware about these policies. So, I think we already have a booklet, but we can update it and put all the policies, all the schemes available to MSMEs at one go, and then our members, if they are aware about it, they'll certainly share with the entrepreneurs. So, Vinita ma'am, what, as per you, are the initiatives and the way forward for these challenges highlighted in this report, particularly pointed out by Mr. Kamath also? Over to you, Ms. Vinita.
Thank you very much, and thank you to ICSI for inviting me here. Indeed, an honor to be hosting it in Kerala, my own land, and today is also Kerala Day. So a very good and auspicious day to discuss a very important topic of MSMEs and startups. We must first acknowledge that both of these have received immense support and backup from the government of the day for the last decade. Before that, MSMEs, there was a department of MSME, but that was never in focus. And we have MSME DIs across the country. There are district industrial centers, but most of them were non-functional and stagnant and not able to actually reach out to the last mile MSMEs. But it was over the last decade that there has been so much of thrust, because entrepreneurship is the vision for India, for jobs for the youth of today and tomorrow. And if you see the youth of today is also, they are not like us. They all have their own dreams, the little dreams or the big dreams. But all these dreams are, I think MSMEs and startups are the vehicle for realizing the dreams of the youth. So having said that, and also the contribution of MSMEs is important, as has been acknowledged already in many of these talks. 30% of GDP, 45% of exports, 11 crore jobs, all of these are definitely, statistics. But yes, the challenges remain. There was a report, of course, the Deloitte report is there, but before that, the RBI committee headed by UK Sinha had understood that had done a very, very detailed examination of the MSME sector in India sometime in 2019, I think. And that report actually analyzes threadbare about the challenges that MSMEs faces. There's about 7-fold challenges. One is access to finance, access to technology, access to human resources, access to information, so on and so forth, access to markets. So all of this are where the challenges identified, and most of the schemes of the MSME ministries, or the recent scheme, has also been designed taking into account those challenges identified by the RBI committee report. And a lot of these schemes are doing justice, I would say, because never before has there been so much of access to funds from the government side for MSMEs. And, leveraging on the digital platforms, because today, if you want to get an MSME certificate, it's very simple. You have to just log on to the site and get the Udyam Aadhaar registrations. It happens, I think, in a day, not even more than a day. So that's the kind of seamless integration and the access to finance from the government side. And since there is no state government intervention, it comes directly, most of the schemes of the Ministry of MSME are central sector schemes. They're not centrally sponsored. So we don't really need the state government support or the state government's share of finance in most of the MSME schemes. So therefore, it comes directly from the ministry to the MSME. So the access to these funds from the central government is now quite seamless. But yes, the challenges remain. 85% of MSMEs are still thin file borrowers, and only 14 to 16% have formal credit access. And 75% of this credit is still collateral dependent in spite of the CGT MSE. So we do acknowledge that there's a long way to go in terms of the last mile penetration of these central government programs to the MSMEs. And as rightly said, the company secretaries can really play an important role in moving beyond corporates and boards and moving out of the comfort zone and moving down to the last mile MSMEs to support them handhold them in, filings, compliances, and so many other things, capacity building, and how can they make their books of account more credit worthy. So these are some things that the company secretaries can do. And unless you have another question on that, I could perhaps talk about how company secretaries can also contribute to the growth of MSMEs. I always talk about these decentralized hubs that we need to have for MSMEs. Local government plays a very important role in actually last mile transfer of central government programs. And the challenge lies in the capacities of the local bodies today in India. Sadly, we've been talking about making local bodies self-reliant and, through the 74th Amendment, but they still haven't reached there because there's a lot of infusion of funds through the 15th and 14th Finance Commission to the local bodies, but they really don't know how to utilize them. So that's one aspect. But still, with the help of the MSME DIs and the particular corporation or the local body, we need to have these MSME hubs, decentralized hubs, at least in every district. And we can make use of the existing DICs. They are, many of them are redundant. There are people from DICs here, but there's a lot of scope for, renovation and rehaul of these DICs, which was one of the recommendations of the World Bank when I was designing the Raising and Accelerating MSME Performance program with the Ministry of MSME. The objective of RAMP was to actually improve the competitiveness of the last mile MSMEs, and one of the suggestions was to revamp the DICs so that they could become the last mile support centers for MSMEs. And I think every DIC can have one company secretary actually going there, maybe not permanently, but at least on a rotational basis, provide advice and see how MSMEs corporate governance the governance of MSMEs can improve to make them more accessible to formal credits and formal sources of financing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vinita, for sharing the government perspective and ministry's views on the same. Looking at the industry experience, Mr. Bansal, I'll come to you for a question. When we are saying that the government is issuing various initiatives and promotional schemes for promoting the MSME sectors, but sometimes we feel that the benefits are not being reached to the industry. They are not aware of it. Awareness is the biggest issue. Then the compliances and the serious protocols are there, because of which the funding is not an ease of access. Reaching to the capital is the biggest issue basically. So despite of the multiple reforms, nearly 40% of MSME is still outside the scope of the formal credit system. And they are also not aware about the various schemes launched by the Government of India and the various institutions for MSMEs. So the question came out, what the major changes you observed in the lending ecosystems from banks, NBFCs or fintechs that are truly improving access to the finance. Mr. Bansal.
Hello. Yeah, it's working now. So good afternoon. See, one thing which at least we have seen over the last 10, 15 years is the role played by the DPI layer. You know, the biggest challenge is not just the availability of the funds, whether it's a bank or any NBFC, it's also the underwriting they have to do before they release the fund. And a lot of the data, because that were not available in a structured manner, that became a bottleneck itself. Now, as we all know, in terms of data exchanges, in terms of payment systems, in terms of KYC and identity verification, huge amount of stuff has happened in India over the last 10, 15 years, and that is enabling much more comfort to all the participants when it comes to lending. Now, still, it's much easier to lend to a salaried person compared to a self-employed person, but because data is now becoming easily available, it is changing things. The second part is the role of tech which is being played. A lot of those decisions used to take much longer because someone has to manually go through everything. Now, a lot of that underwriting is also happening using tech. The biggest challenge, unfortunately, is that as a country, we are a low-trust society. So if you cannot trust the data that you're getting, then how do you make a decision based on that? So now, if you look at some of the models being created, especially using AI, you are able to call out some of the potential frauds or people who are trying to, misuse the system. Unfortunately, because there may be just 1 or 2% people who will misuse, everyone gets harmed because of that, because, the rules are created to catch that 1-2%, rather than say, okay, we'll start with the trust and then tighten the process. So it's not an easy answer, to be honest. I think using all these 2-3 things, it will improve, but it won't improve overnight. It will take time. The situation is much better today. See, for companies like ours, which are more startup, there is a lot more funding available in the private space. But for most of the SMEs, it's very tough to tap into that private space, because unless you are raising a large amount, it's very tough for the private VC community to actually start to fund you. And that too in a physical business, which is not mostly digital. So it's a very different problem to solve from MSME. This other thing I think which can potentially happen and not yet happen as much is working capital funding. See, one part is obviously your CapEx funding, but the OpEx funding itself is a very big area. And if the whole invoicing mechanism is happening through a system, then you can trust that system to get the funding in place. Again, I think that's a mixed bag, whatever little I understand. Uh, there are some fintechs which started thinking about working capital funding, but none of them have got to a scale. And because the problem for most of the fintechs is that at the back end, they have an NBFC or a bank to support. So unless the bank and NBFC also relaxes their own underwriting norms, fintech will not be able to just do anything. Fintech is mostly creating a little bit more efficiency into delivery of the service and removing the friction. But the balance sheet usually does not belong to the fintechs.
Thank you. Uh, when we are talking about the growth of the MSME, I'll come to Mr. Sajid for you. When we're talking about the growth of the MSMEs, mostly we see that it's growing into the tier 2 or tier 3 cities only. For rest of the tier 4s or other small places, it's very tough for having an easy access for them to having an administration, infrastructure and financings. These become the most challenges for them. So Mr. Sajid, can you just guide when I'm talking about over 6.3 crores MSMEs are there and over 51% are based at tier 2 and tier 3 cities only. So what are the factors that contributes to MSME throwing into tier 2 and tier 3 cities, taking an example from Kerala?
Yeah, question is interesting one. But the fact is that in Kerala, the difference between tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 is fast disappearing. It's like it's becoming a one urban center. This is primarily because of many initiatives that has happened over a period of time, and the access for almost everything is uniformly distributed. If you look at the roads, if you look at the railway connectivity, if you look at the power distribution, if you look at the internet access, if you look at the education, so it is across the state, it is uniformly distributed. The second biggest aspect is the distribution of income across the state. It is almost equally distributed. So end of the day, when you look at or study the performance of industries, companies, or any initiatives, this needs to be looked at Kerala as a whole, as a one single entity. Now in that context, if you ask me, or if you specifically talk about any company or sectors, there are certain focus areas that happens. One is on the wood-based industries, or the furniture-based industries, or coir-based industries, or rice mill-based industries. All these are success stories of Kerala. And in all those, there has been a close integration between the market and the producer. So end of the day, when you look at MSMEs, from a startup mission point of view and from a government executive point of view, what I have seen is that wherever the MSMEs are in the business of B2B, the success rate is more. Primarily because the cash flow is much easier happening in a B2B business. Second is that the market exploration or the market development activities are also better managed by the MSMEs when it happens at the B2B. The struggle is there when it is in the B2C segment, and especially when it is on a newly developed product or product with certain features enhanced. These gets a lot of testing and trials happens at the consumer before he or she accepts it or adopts it. So on the broader picture of Kerala economy, or the contribution or the growth of MSMEs and startups in the Kerala ecosystem, I am seeing a very positive progress, and a lot of interventions are happening from the investors in improving the quality of the MSMEs. For example, if you are in a recent summit on the cybersecurity, I was attending it, and the cybersecurity, the organizer, that itself is a big company in the domain of cybersecurity. So the company offered the first 500 companies who register for their services will get 1 year of cybersecurity services at free of cost. So in the first 1 hour itself, the company received more than 1,000 applications from the MSMEs. So look at the kind of interest that the companies in Kerala showing towards technology adoption. It's a huge positive thing that I am seeing it in the Kerala ecosystem. So I think from a Kerala point of view, there is a lot of uniformity in distribution of resources that helps in the growth, and a lot of awareness that existing amongst the MSMEs, which helps them to tap into the various schemes of the state and central government, additionally to explore the new forms of capitals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sajid Kumar, for explaining the perspective about the startups and MSMEs in Kerala. In fact, we already have our former president, our own member, Mr. Kamath. I'll ask you another question from here. Now, since so much stress particularly is given here on technology, AI, you being the former president of chamber here, I would like to ask you that, as I mentioned earlier as well, briefly, elaborate that. The difficulty which I personally feel, I've seen many startups facing this, that they may not have a physical collateral. They may not have a track record to prove and to then get funding. Now, in this era of business potential ideas and ideas being sold actually at a marketplace, in your experience as the head of a Chamber of Commerce here, what do you think, particularly from the perspective as Vinita Madam also highlighted, now so much changes have been done by the government also, even in the union budget. The classification has been changed, the investment parameters have been raised, the turnover threshold has been changed, the credit guarantee cover requirements are changed. Now, keeping this in mind, now what and how significant changes and what changes are required to access to the formal credit for MSMEs, particularly keeping this mindset instead of relying on the past track record, looking at the business potential and forming new parameters. Mr. Kamath.
Thank you so much. Like I highlighted my initial address, the problems faced, but these are all addressable actually. One of the things which we must do is to improve the accessibility of finance actually. Like we have been saying, collateral free, that loan, this loan, but is it really happening? We need to introspect that. Of course, you need to have, the banks just cannot fund it. You need to have documents at least to show what you are doing. There I think the role of company secretary, we must tell these guys or the entrepreneurs what are the minimum at least documents they must have actually. Secondly, the government which has expanded the guarantee scheme, that gives a lot of opportunity for the MSMEs now to get the guarantees for the loans and all those things. Those things can also be explored. Third one is, like I said in my initial, but the financial literacy actually. MSME people, smaller entrepreneurs are not MBAs or they may have some education, but they are not the kind of professionals or something like that. So they must be educated. They go and borrow from a lending, private finance without thinking that they have to pay more. They know very well they have to pay, but they will not think the consequences. When they need money, they go pledge or they go borrow and use that money for whatever purpose, and that is done. Government of India gave Mudra loan. Where is the report on Mudra loan? What it has been used? 10 lakhs rupees was given. Is there, I don't know, any formal report is there how this 10 lakhs was utilized? I was told that most of the cases they have done their daughter's marriage with the 10 lakh rupees. Who is accountable for? Nobody is accountable. You have given the loan, you have spent the money. So whether the money is going to the productive persons, who is monitoring? Do you have any statistic to say that whatever money was given under Mudra, it has been used for business purpose? When COVID came, most of the MSMEs collapsed like a pack of cards. Government couldn't do anything. So there need to be some kind of a formal system which protects and monitors these MSMEs actually. They have an extremely poor cash flow. Like Vinita madam said, no, they survive on day-to-day basis. I will tell you an example. Recently, last year, a representation came from an MSME association saying that they have a clause in the income tax, if you don't pay them within 15 or 45 days, that expense will be disallowed. Because of that, big companies are not buying from MSME. And they have told MSME, you deregister from MSME, then we'll buy you. So the measure taken by the government has become a counterproductive actually. In fact, we wrote a representation, Nirmala Sitharaman, saying that you brought in this legislation saying that expense will be disallowed. Today, the big manufacturers are not buying from MSME because this clause is there. He is saying, I am getting 90 days credit from another non-MSME. Why should I buy from MSME? There is a systematic flaw in that law itself. That needs to be relooked at. Similarly, for the startups today, why they are finding difficult? Because you don't have a minimum viable project actually. Everybody, in India it's a craze. Somebody gets to startup, everybody wants to get to startup. Somebody sets up logistics, everybody wants to get to logistics. Somebody wants retail, everybody wants to get retail. You don't do the basic homework. You get into some kind of a startup without knowing the consequences. You need to retain people. You need to have minimum viable project. If you take a project to the institution or a bank, nobody will believe because banks believe in collateral. They believe in something which is visible actually. If you say this is a fintech, very difficult. There are successful, I'll say, startups. I'm not saying that, I'm not denying that. But there are failures too. Why it is happening? Because there is no kind of a control or some kind of an ecosystem which can nurture and protect. How many mentors are there today? All the startups are finding it difficult to get mentors. We have, our country has, the high esteemed institutional IITs, IIMs. Let all IITs be the nurturing or the mentorship. Let them develop mentorships. One or two IIMs have got this mentorship. Why there is no mentorship for startups? Please develop that ecosystem of getting mentorship for startup, and then you see what is the results. So what is happening? All these brainy IITians and they do some kind of idea. They have idea. They create this idea, but they are not able to take this to next level because of the lack of support. And that is where I think I will say that the company secretary certainly will have to get into that actually. And there's a good opportunity for us actually to nurture and mentor them and guide them. Like I said in my remark, the entrepreneurs are not here to look after the compliances and the regulations actually. It is not their cup of tea actually. They should be creative, create and see how your idea can be materialized. That is what my submissions are.
Thank you, Mrs. Ajit Kumar. I'll come to the question when we are talking about Ms. Vinita, I'll come to you on this. When I'm talking about the initiatives where the government of India are there, and like Make in India and Startup Indias are there. So these initiatives have definitely reshaped the entrepreneurial landscape in India. But still, it has not been reached to the last mile person or beyond tier 2 or tier 3 cities entrepreneurs are there. So what challenges still persist in the implementation of these initiatives and how they can be addressed better so that to support the early stage of the ventures. So what is your views on that?
Sure, thank you. So as has been mentioned, of course, startups are, being promoted and they contribute a lot. 1.8 lakh, almost 18 lakh jobs, cutting across 80 sectors, and more than 100 unicorns in the country, valued at more than 350 billion US dollars. So all of that, having said that, having acknowledged that, as you said, there are a lot of challenges that the startups are facing. One is, of course, the translation of the the support that the government of India is giving to the last mile. Most of the government of India's efforts are on liquidity infusion, which goes to banks, and then banks thereon have to then transfer it to the startups. So I think that is one big challenge which the banks are facing, because the banks are always burdened with this NPAs. And that's a big Damocles sword kind of hanging on their head when they talk about, when there is a lot of pressure from ministries to disburse funds, but at the same time they also have to take care of their NPA norms. So that's a big hurdle. So one way of skirting this or circling around this is to involve and integrate NBFCs into this entire financing of startups. Because there, we wouldn't say the regulatory norms are lax, but still with the overall, under the supervision of the RBI and controls, we can have faster lending given to startups through NBFCs. That is some proposal even the World Bank has validated, involving NBFCs more in at least, channelizing the liquidity that the government of India is giving through various measures, reducing repo rate, so much of liquidity getting infused into the market, but where is the gap? So that is one, I think. And then, of course, their compliances. The huge number of compliances that startups have, there are around 750 compliance touch points are there for a startup, which is extremely burdensome for a new startup. So I think there again, company secretaries can play a role, like I mentioned, in helping startups also go through their compliances. The startups to even file their compliances through maybe app-based applications. We could also look at having access to everybody's mobiles for compliances, not necessarily hire a chartered accountant. Every startup cannot afford a chartered accountant. So I think that is another problem. And another problem we observe is the regional disparities. Some proactive states, right now about 65% of startups are focused in 5 states of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Delhi and Maharashtra. So what about the other states? So I think we need to also have regional dispersion as far as startups are concerned, and have equitable access for the startup funding across the country, not just in these proactive and progressive states. So that is something we need to take care of. And also I think the infrastructure gaps, although there has been a lot of digital infrastructure push, but under 4% of rural MSMEs and startups have access to broadband, whereas in urban centers, close to 15% have access to the broadband infrastructure. So these are some of the things we need to take care of. So I think the national seed funds like the Startup India and all of that should be converged with the state innovation missions. There needs to be a convergence between the state initiatives and the national initiatives, because a lot of states are doing a lot of things, but not necessarily converged with what the central government is doing. So all of these are in silos. We need to converge all of these efforts, and that will surely make a difference.
Thank you, Vinita ma'am. You have touched a very important topic. In fact, we always, being company secretaries, we always talk about this. Mr. Bansal is here, who is representing a startup, and honestly, taking his view on this is very critical, because we always say compliance is a cost. People say it. We always say, in fact, I remember our former president used to say, then try non-compliance. If compliance is a cost, try non-compliance, and then you will see and taste the nectar which you get by non-complying. In fact, what we always say is that it's not a cost, it's an investment. And the startups or the MSMEs or the entrepreneurs who are not able to understand this in the beginning, they understand it eventually the hard way. Now, I don't know what support our members are giving to startups. Particularly Mr. Bansal is here, but he can certainly mention about the support which the company secretaries and corporate governance leaders are giving to their organization. But my question to you, Mr. Bansal, is, now this ease of doing business, Vinita ma'am referred to that we have to reduce the compliances to make it more conducive for ease of doing business, but that's the problem. When you liberalize, when you again make the things easier, then you will again enter the zone of non-complying and eventually failing. Mr. Bansal, which I think Ms. Vanita can then later add her inputs as well. So what's the kind of support you get, Mr. Bansal, from governance professionals like us, and whether you really believe that compliance is a cost, and for achieving this ease of doing business, we'll have to liberalize and then reduce the compliances? Mr. Bansal, and then I think Vinita ma'am also wants to add something later. Bansal sahab.
I think, see, when we look at the startup community or even MSME from that perspective, I think most of the time, the person who is driving the business is not thinking of governance and compliance as a full-time job for themselves. They're focusing on the customer, and they're focusing on creating a solution. So there's obviously a need for someone to look at that the process and the control part in a business is as important as the sales and the BD part. But unfortunately, at the early stage of the company, people do not have enough focus on that. And you rightly said that at some point it comes back to hurt them in a very big way. The role here has to be played by the, I mean, it depends whether you have a VCs, whether you have banks, whether you have, independent directors or some board. But see, if you look at the journey of a company, eventually when you talk to any external stakeholder, one is what you are trying to build and sell, right? That's the story. But that already assumes that there is a particular compliance and governance system is in place. If that is not in place, everything else falls through very, very fast. And the role played by whether it is the legal professionals or company secretaries becomes very, very essential in that sense. Unfortunately, a lot of times, and this is, I'm saying in front of everyone here, professionals in these functions have to be confident enough to push back. If a founder is saying that this is the way I want to work, and that is somewhere gray, then it is up to the community of company secretaries and legal professionals to come back and say, no, this is not done, or this is not the way to approach. There will be a lot of times where, I can give examples from our own company, and this is nothing to do with company secretaries per se, but this is a real example. Long back when we were a very young company, the BD team came back and said, finance team is taking much longer to create the invoice, and our receivables are going up because of that, and we are being asked. So they on their own decided that BD team will create their own invoice without informing finance. Now from business perspective, they wanted to just remove the friction without realizing what is the big mess they would have created for the company. By chance, I got to know from the admin person that there was a need for letterheads in Mumbai. And I said, why are you sending letterheads to Mumbai? And that's when we found out that BD team was planning to create those invoices. Now, without realizing it is a legal document which will have to have some compliance, accounting, everything attached to it. It would have killed the company if we had by chance made that mistake. Right? Now, in our company, from day one, because I was more process and control person, we could still stop it. But there will be a lot of organizations where there is no one to look at these aspects. So what will happen? Because, as we have discussed, we are not taught about some of these basic things when we are studying. I mean, yes, it's good to study history, geography, physics, chemistry, everything, but you're not taught basic life skills, financial planning, nothing of those things. So, you have to learn on the job. And expecting, I was hearing other panelists and we are talking about government support. At one side we say we don't need government to intervene, and other side we are saying government should help. So we have to take a stand that we want government to be there, not government to be there in part of business community. Today we have 60,000 compliances in India, 60,000, 30,000 plus are just in labor department. How do you expect any company, MSME, to even navigate that? And I don't expect even a CS or a legal professional to navigate that. It is just too complicated. So we need to have a sandbox approach that for small companies, till they reach a particular level, you give them a lot more freedom, let them grow. Once they grow, then you put the compliance burden to the same extent. But today, even on a day one company, you're asking the same compliance that a company with 100 crore, 200 crore revenue is going to do. That is not fair somewhere. So multiple things here, but I think governance is a given. I mean, you cannot have a shortcut there. Today we are listed organization, and I always say that investors give us value for two things. The first one being that we are able to perform and operate in the same way that we are committing to them. And the second is that there is no question mark on compliance and governance. But, if there is no compliance and governance at the base level, then practically do not have a business.
Very relevant. Vinita ma'am, you wanted to add something? Then I'll
No, I just wanted to intervene to say that not to reduce the compliances, not to compromise on the financial rigor or corporate governance, but make it more easy for the MSMEs to comply in terms of the processes. Make it more seamless and integrated through use of technological platforms, while the government is also looking at reducing the number of laws and making laws more easy, like the labor codes. We've shrunk the 25 labor codes to 4 codes. So similar to that, if we can have just 4 or 5 major compliances, which actually the ends are the same as what you have with so many thousands of compliances.
Thank you, ma'am. When we are talking about the government initiatives and the ease of doing business and all these initiatives are there, the one important one after the compliances which come to my mind is financial literacy, especially for the tier 2 and tier 3 cities and the women, those are staying into villages and all that. Most of them generally send the male person to his family to with a debit card, credit card to borrow the money from the ATMs and all that. So when and how we can work upon, I have seen the NGOs also, those who are working on the financial literacy, teaching people that how you make the UPI payments and all that. So what target, Sajid ji, I am coming to you on this question. What targeted strategies, according to you, can be implemented to ensure that financial literacy and increase the awareness of credit schemes amongst micro enterprises, especially where those operating in the undeserved area, I should say, or the informal sector, so that they can be more financial literate, and what targeted strategies can be there? Sajid ji.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused how to answer to this question, because my experience of hosting or conducting financial literacy programs, either the trainings, workshops, or meetups, all were disastrous. It is not in one occasion I failed, it fails every time. Whether it is a half a day workshop where we want the entrepreneurs to come, hear it about the various schemes, what are the eligibility criteria, how you need to submit your proposals, etc. With templates, when we wanted to discuss with them, then we will get, registrations will be 100 plus, participants will be 20 plus, and after tea or after lunch, it will reduce to 1 or 2. So this is, I don't know whether it is only problem at this part of the country, but otherwise, now what we did, okay, let's go from offline to online, if that suits for them and if that reduces their pain of sitting in a hall. So there again, what happens is that half of the people will never open their videos, and the other part, what will happen is that they will be busy with doing something else with their accounts open. So this also not made any big positives to me. But on the other side, on the startup side, I have seen a lot of education happening on these financial aspects, primarily because of the strictness that has been enforced by the investor. What happens is that for a startup, if he or she is planning to raise angel or VC investment from the investor, he or she will not give the money unless certain criteria are satisfied by the startup. So there, yes, the good part is that there is no government. It is not something that it is my eligible amount. That argument, that claim is not there from the startup, because startup also understand that he or she has to present it, win that deal from that investor. So in that process, there is lot of effort happens on the part of the startup or the founder, either to make his governance into a proper manner, to make his accounts clear, to make the systems in place. All this happens there. Even that takes hiring a third party to do that on behalf of the company. So it is not fair from my side to say that, okay, when we offer things from the government at a free or a subsidized thing, the approach by the entrepreneurs are also slightly sluggish. So the answer for that or the solution for that is not to reduce all these subsidies. No, that is not the answer. But then ma'am has rightly mentioned that, okay, there can be an easy adoption of the new interfaces that are available to us. The technology-based interfaces, which solves many of the data filing aspects can be reduced or simplified, or capture certain data from various existing filings that has already been made by the company. So what happens is that if you go for a loan, then if a certain data is already available in the government in one department or other department, fetch it from those things so that the kind of additional information that needs to be filled by the entrepreneur or the company can be reduced. Second is on the certain other aspects, like one of the case I will just give an example is that one of the startup, he got an order from a B2G institution under the B2G agreement or arrangement. Now to execute that particular order, this company requires around 20 lakhs because it's a defense project, so there is no point of giving an advance to the startup. So this startup needs 20 lakhs from a financial institution. Now there is a scheme already there. There is a loan against purchase order. That scheme is already there in Kerala. So this startup rushed to the nearest implementing agency, said that, okay, see, look at the purchase order I got from the company. Now you sanction my 20 lakhs. Now the problem here is that the scheme, under the conditions, there's one more thing that if you are looking for a loan against a purchase order, the company who is issuing the purchase order should also give an undertaking. A poor startup, he hasn't read the entire policy or the guidelines of that loan and rushed to the financial institution, and financial institution said, get that particular form also filled by the company who issued the work order to you. Now the problem for the defense is that once in one of the apex body or a high power committee, they decide to issue the work order, and to issue any other undertaking or a certification will require another 3 more months, because there that committees are not happens every week. So the problem for the story or the lesson that we learned, the startup and startup mission together learned, is that when we promote such schemes, then all those things, if it can come in a digital format, wherein the templates, all these prerequisites can be given in one shot, then this problem would not have been there. So I think there needs to be, compliances are required, restrictions are required, but then look at adopting the various available technology-based forms or platforms to simplify it.
Very well explained, Sajid ji, and in fact that triggers another question which I have dealt. Kamat Sahab, if you can very briefly, because we'll open the floor for questions, we'll ask the participant to ask few questions and we'll make it more interactive. But before I do so, my last question to you in the panel would be what Sajid ji said. Now, I've dealt and I've appeared for many of the startups. I've appeared for many of MSMEs also, where we see that the difficulty, real difficulty is the inability to recover debt. So they do the business, but at the same time, despite a special treatment given to them, despite that Samadhan portal being given, despite the government trying to have a different mechanism for MSMEs to recover their dues, including the reporting being done. The problem is that whether we are actually adapting to smart contracts. What I realized when I recently visited Singapore for Singapore International Arbitration Conference, now they are really relying on smart contracts, and many of the organizations do follow a very strict regime that this is a contract. Your quality department will upload OK on a portal. Once OK is done, it's like then a bank guarantee. The bank directly disburses the fund. So how do you, from the chamber perspective, very briefly reflect upon this?
No, we have not advanced to that stage actually. In India, if there's a dispute, they'll say you fight a case because it will go forever actually. Today you see, can you file any civil case in a court of law? If somebody defaults on a contract, I have to wait 25 years to get judgment, then it will go on appeal actually. We don't have that kind of ecosystem like Singapore has or other countries have, where the judicial process is very fast. You default, you are issued a notice, there's no unnecessary adjournments are given, case is decided and you are penalized. But India, it is not like our judiciary is totally different. Unless we revamp our judicial system, all these smart contracts or all those things will not work if there is a dispute. An agreement is a good agreement as long as it is in the safe custody of the, or it's in Almara. Once it goes to the court, all agreements is same only. It will take 30 or 40 years and you don't know what is the outcome of the thing. So we have, all those things can happen if you have robust technology, coupled with the legal system, being totally rejuvenated. We don't have that kind of a system today to enforce any of the claims. May it be smallest one actually. You go for an arbitration, it takes time. You go for a judicial process, it takes time actually. So we are not reached, Chawla sir, that stage as yet actually.
Thank you. Thank you, Kamath sir. We are short of time. In fact, we do have all the 4 panelists available here, and even Mr. Bajaj, Mr. Ajay Sancheti, who is part. If we have one question we can have, and then because we'll be the culprit if we hold you back. The lunch is ready, so if you have any question, we can have 1 or 2 questions, maybe very short. One question, although Alka ma'am said that we should close, but since I had already mentioned, I took the liberty to allow, sir. Yes, please go ahead.
Please.
Yeah, I am Shekhar, Director and Company Secretary with the TCG. Yeah, both Ms. Vinita Hariharan and Mr. Kamath mentioned about the funding challenges faced by the SMEs. Especially Vinita ji mentioned that only 14% of the SMEs have access to credit. While on the one hand, you have those organized startups who are high-tech, they are able to mobilize billions of funding in several rounds. But most of them are left high and dry, and especially those which are worthy of funding. So how are we effectively tackling this challenge of accessing funds? What initiatives have been taken? And flowing from this, what has been the development in terms of angel funding? Well, how many of them, has there been any study, how many of them have been able to access angel funding, and what initiatives have been taken to marry the investors and those who need the funds? And another aspect is, you mentioned about the RBI report on the different gaps, challenges faced in terms of technology, capital, and various other fronts. So do we have a study industry-wide? Because we cannot paint everyone with the same brush. So do we have industry-wide study across 3 crore SMEs? If you look at industry-wide, what are the challenges and what specific...
Please read through the question, sir.
Yeah, what specific initiatives need to be taken to address this?
Yeah, please.
This is to me?
To both Kamath ji and Vinita.
Yeah, I said one of the main problem for startups is actually the funding. And many entrepreneurs today struggle to attract venture capitalists and also the angel investors due to the perceived risk of associated early stage of your project. They want to put the money, but they are not sure. So what they'll say, you put money, now then let us see how the project goes. You initially put and then we see the viability. At least you bring the project to the minimum viability level. And all these startup owners or the entrepreneurs are young, they don't have a financial banking. So basic problem today faced by all these investors is that they don't have a background. Like you said, in the earlier session, you said, no, if it's a startup by Tatas, there are people to invest. But all these startups are by the brilliant brains, technical brains, and they don't have a backup actually. That is why today angel investors and venture capitalists take some risk, but they are also very scared now to invest because of this. They are not sure that this project will take off or not. That's a major problem today faced by all the new startups.
Add to that, so one, way of improving the access to finance is adopt alternative methods of appraisals like cash flow based, lending. That is something that is being experimented, and also the SIDBI's, the digital public infrastructure, where they are actually doing digital scoring of MSMEs, which is, helping banks to evaluate the risk aspects of MSMEs. But having said that, there are still a large gap. One is it all stems from the financial literacy aspect, which was discussed. So I think perhaps as part of this, it calls for a mass financial literacy, maybe through an institutionalized course, maybe Institute of Company Secretaries themselves can design a course for MSMEs and startups to make them financially literate, and maybe an exam which they pass, which says that they've passed this test and they can therefore access better funding from some banks. That's something that we can think about. Regarding the study, sector-wise study, the Ministry of MSME has made an attempt to do a sector-wise, but not micro-level industries. But that is something that perhaps can also be thought of. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinita ma'am. Though we don't have the specific course, but yes, we have created MSME board. Mr. Bajaj is there, is chairing that board from the ICSI. Additionally, in chartered secretaries also, we have taken up the MSME corners basically from the chartered secretary. Mr. Bajaj, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to make a request, Vinita ji and Mr. Sajid. I think company secretaries are the ones from the last 3 years. We have a very structured work being done on this MSME and startup, and our members are also very actively working in this space. And one thing which we want to do is to sign a MOU, or we can have an arrangement with DICs where our members can act as an interface. As you, I think the panel has very categorically said that there's a lot of gap between the reality which is there on the ground and the regulations we have. So our members can actually act as a catalyst to fill that gap, help the MSMEs and startup entrepreneurs, and maybe do the capacity building for them and do the hand holding for them. So maybe a structured approach can be very good. And I think it will be a win-win situation for our members as well as the entrepreneurs.
I have a suggestion what he said actually. Since Institute has an MSME and startup board, I think we should now go for mentorship actually. Today what is lacking for all startup is mentorship. They have an idea, they have a brain, but they don't know what to do actually. You need to mentor them, and that is what's seriously lacking in India today. That is why most of the startups, they start and then they don't know what to do, they just abandon the project. And that is why basically angel investors and the venture capital are not investing, because you are not sure whether this idea will get commercially implemented or not.
That is where I am making a suggestion that a structured approach can be there from DIC and the maybe DPIIT or maybe state government startup board also to involve our members there. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Bajaj. Thank you, all the panelists. Kamath sir, you have given a very nice suggestion. So, Mr. Bajaj, work for you, and under leadership of our president, I'm sure now you can roll out an UI for people, for our members to become the mentors. Maybe initially they build a client, and then when the client grows, obviously they can charge more fee. Initially, you will have to give the mentorship, maybe pro bono. I'm not sure what will be the model, but certainly some brainstorming can be done on that. So thank you all the panelists for brainstorming suggestions which have come forward. I'm sure we'll compile all of them and then submit it. Thank you all the panelists. Thank you, Institute, for giving us this opportunity. Over to you, Disha.
Thank you everybody for bringing the critical issues relating to MSME and startup for deliberations today. As a token of gratitude, I would now request our Vice President, Shri C.S. Pawan Chandak, to please come on the dais and present a memento to our expert panelist, Shri Alok Bansal ji. I would request for a huge round of applause. The deliberations were very good. Thank you, sir. I would now request C.S. Mahadev Tirunagari, Vice Chairman SIRC, to please come on the dais and present a memento to our guest speaker, Shri S.P. Kamath. I would request all of you to please join your hands for a round of applause for the panelists for a wonderful, wonderful session. I would now request CS Gokul Shinoy, Vice Chairman Kochi Chapter, to please come on the dais and present a memento to our panelist, Ms. Vinita Hariharan. Request CS Pavan Vijay, former President ICSI, to please come on the dais and present a memento to our learned panelist, Lieutenant Commander Sajid Kumar EV. A huge round of applause, gentlemen. And thank you all for this wonderful session. Thank you, sir. So we'll join after the lunch for our next technical session.